Broadcasting from the studios of WKEN, where every day it's the weekend. It's the Ken Calvert Show with your host, Ken Calvert.
Hey now, and hi everybody, I'm Ken Calvert, and welcome to the Ken Calvert Show podcast, broadcasting live from Southeast Lower Michigan, cozy studios of WKEN, where every day is the weekend. Coming up today, I'm going to introduce you to Peter Leonard. Well, here's the story, and I am sticking to it. I met Peter Leonard when I was in the third grade, St. Bede in Southfield, Michigan, and we got off to what you may call a not-so-auspicious start. You'll hear about that in the podcast. From grade school, we went from there to being high school buddies, college roommates at Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. During the summer, we were house painters. We called our company Turpentine. Imagine hijinks on steroids. I still flash back whenever I see a painter on a ladder dressed in their all-whites on a 95-degree day. We were roommates in the 70s after college. I was starting my radio career, and Pete was starting a long and extremely successful career in advertising and eventually creating Leonard Mayer Advertising. Now, Pete's dad is Elmore Leonard, the Dickens of Detroit. Elmore Leonard. Among his best-known works are Get Shorty, Out of Sight, Swag, Hombre, Mr. Majestic, Rum Punch. Leonard's writings include short stories that became films. You all know 310 to Yuma and The Tall T as well. The FX television series, Justified. Where am I going with this? Well, it's simple. Talking about Peter Leonard's new novel called Raylan Goes to Detroit. We all know Raylan Givens, a true blue hero, something of a throwback, given that he takes to wearing a Stetson and cowboy boots, carrying a sidearm in his hip holster. Well, we lost Elmore, and possibly we all thought we lost Raylan Givens. Nope, we did not. We lost Elmore in August of 2013, but Peter Leonard picks up the story with his 8th novel, number 8. Number 9 is done, he'll tell you about that, and he's working on novel number 10. Raylan Goes to Detroit. And I'll let Peter Leonard tell you the rest of the story. Enjoy, everybody. We've known each other since 3rd grade. And you want to tell the nice people what happened that day?
I think I asked you to wrestle. You want to wrestle?
That's right, you did. My parents moved, and we went to St. Bede together, and I came like in the middle of the year. So I was very uncomfortable. I came in, and everybody already knew everybody, and you were sort of the row captain, if you will. And I sat next to you, and you looked over at me and just kind of gave me a weird glare. Like, you're going down, big boy. You're going down.
Who are you? Who the hell do you think you are?
And what are you doing in that seat? So we go outside for playground. Back in the day when it was they used those giant cement sewer barrels. Remember those?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And we had those monkey bars and a parking lot. Go have fun, kids. So you walk over to me and said, "Hey, want to wrestle?" And I don't think I even answered. And you flipped me on the ground.
I was taking judo lessons then.
In 3rd grade.
Yeah.
You should also know Peter Leonard is my guest author. And Peter and I go way back, like I said, started 3rd grade. We were roommates in college. We were roommates after college. We were house painters. We did a lot of things. We've done a lot of things together, and here we are. So simply put, tell them about being a house painter.
Well, we were Turpentine, and
that's right.
Ken Calvert picked me up every morning in a red Chevy Nova. And
that had Krager mags on it.
Oh, yeah, right. I remember, sure. And we would go to a house and paint. It was a terrible job. And I remember one time being up on a ladder, and there were 2 girls sleeping, and the window was open slightly. Yeah. And I got my finger caught in the window, and it was locked. And the girls thought I was staring at them. It was funny.
At the time, it was funny, wasn't it?
Yes.
We didn't have a lot of fun painting, and we certainly didn't make a lot of money. But it just gave us fodder for, later in life, boy, some good stories came out of that. But speaking of that, you're a gifted storyteller, son of Elmore Leonard, the Dickens of Detroit. Let's talk a little bit about that real quickly. Do you know how many total packages, books, scripts Elmore wrote?
He wrote 45 novels, I think a dozen scripts, and many short stories over a 65-year career.
And you were saying, you just recently spoke downtown at the Detroit Library, part of the author series, and you got up in front of a large gathering and basically told the story behind Raylan Goes to Detroit. Raylan Goes to Detroit is book number 8, correct?
Correct.
And you're working on 9 and 10?
No, 9 is finished. It's called Sweet Dreams, and I'm working on 10.
All right, well, okay, so going back to your father. You spent a lot of time with your father. He came over a lot in his later years, and you made him dinner each and every night. And that was really some special time for you and your dad, right?
Yeah, it was great. It was a time to relax at the end of the day, the work day, and talk about writing. Elmore was told by his third wife at this time that she wasn't going to make him dinner anymore. And she said she was too busy. So I would take dinner over to him, and then I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I'll just have him over to our house. And so it began. Elmore would drive up in his 1996 Volkswagen Cabriolet, backfiring up the driveway. And
true story, folks.
He would get out of the car and come in the house and do a little tap dance on the kitchen floor, the wood floor, light a Virginia Slims 100. I'd pour him a glass of wine, and we were off and running.
Give me an example of you and your dad having a chat. About what?
He would say to me, "What's your title?" And I, at this particular time, said, "Unidentified Remains." And he took a drag on his cigarette and blew out the smoke and said, "How about Unknown Remains?"
Wow.
Shorter, pithier. And I said, "Of course." And so that's the title that it became.
What about, he always talked to you about your characters. You had a character that he didn't care for the name that you had, right?
Right. A bad guy. He said, "Who's your bad guy?" Yeah. And I said, Dale Pollard. And he looked at me and he said, "That's not a bad guy name." And I knew he was right. And so I thought about it. And the next time he came over, I said, "I got a new name for my bad guy." And he said, "Yeah?" And Elmore looked at me and I said, "How about Dwayne Cobb?" And he said, "That's a bad guy name." So that was the kind of thing we talked about. Elmore was writing a book at the time called Blue Dreams, and it was about a bull rider named Kyle McCoy and a bull rider groupie named Celeste, and they met one evening and spent the next 3 days in bed. At the conclusion of which Celeste got a tattoo on her lower abdomen that said, "Kyle was here." And Elmore loved that. He loved that scene. I said, "So that's the book?" He said, "Oh, no." He said, "There's more to it than that." Well, here's another example. I had gone to a Barnes & Noble one afternoon, and my father came over for dinner, and I told him that I'd picked up a random thriller at the bookstore, opened it and read the first line of the prologue and closed the book. One of Elmore's 10 rules of writing is avoid prologues. They can be annoying, especially a prologue following an introduction that comes after a foreword. So Elmore said to me, "Okay, how'd the guy start his book?" And I said, the first line was, "The wind howled like a beast in pain." And Elmore took a drag on his cigarette, took a couple of beats, and he looked at me and he said, "Never open a book from the wind's point of view."
That's beautiful. Which leads me to this. Peter Leonard, author of Raylan Goes to Detroit. We're going to get there shortly. Your dad had a very, very simple little top 10, right, that he did. The rules, basic rules of writing. And wasn't one of them never open a scene with weather
Yes.
And what were some of the other ones? I don't have them right in front of me, but...
Never use a word other than said to carry dialogue.
Uh-huh.
Use patois, slang, sparingly.
What does that mean? I don't know what patois slang is.
It's slang.
Wasn't he? He was crazy about people that overused the exclamation point, wasn't he?
Keep your exclamation points under control, unless you're Tom Wolfe.
Okay.
Then you can use a couple of thousand. But I don't think I've ever used an exclamation point in the 9 books I've written, because I don't think you need it.
All right, I interviewed Tom Clancy. I went back, and Clancy was a miserable guy on the air. I had a really tough time talking to him. And I said, Mr. Clancy, I have a friend, Elmore Leonard. Sometimes they call him the Dickens of Detroit. And he was like, well, I know the man. And I said, well, what Elmore does is he gets up in the morning and he sits down at 9 o'clock in the morning in front of a legal pad. And he uses a pen or whatever the case may be, and he writes until lunchtime, and then he takes a break, has some lunch, and then goes back to work and wraps it up about 4 or 5 o'clock. And he said, I could never do it that way, ever. I was like, okay, well, I thought it might prompt you to tell me how you did it, but that was sort of Elmore's style, correct?
It was. Actually, he ate very little for lunch because he didn't want to be slowed down at all. Food will, do that to you.
It certainly can, yes.
And he would work till...
Know it well.
He'd work till about 6, and then he'd roll a joint, and he'd smoke a little weed and go upstairs and take a shower and get ready for dinner.
Wow.
And while he was in the shower, he was thinking of ideas. The weed would propel...
Had kicked in, yeah.
Some thoughts, yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting. How about your style now? Let's go there.
I work, I like to get to my desk at 9 o'clock,
okay.
And I work for a few hours, and then I go to a health club and work out for 45 minutes, come home, have a little bite to eat, and then continue on till about 5 o'clock.
What if you got nothing in your tank that day? You just sit there going, come on, come on, come on.
Elmore told me that he didn't believe in writer's block. You just sit there until you figure out the problem. And I think he's right.
How long does it take you to write a book?
Typically a year.
Really?
To write it and fool with it and make sure it's perfect.
So many artists in the music industry, you always ask them, where do they get their motivation? Where do they come up with the story for the song? Give me the background on this one, Bob. And they always say, it could happen. It could happen on the tour bus. It could happen on the way to the show. I may get an idea in the middle of the night, get up and write it down on a piece of paper, and the next day I got a song. So there are all sorts of various fuses for input out there. But you all of a sudden come up with an idea. And again, Raylan Goes to Detroit is coming up soon. We're going to talk about the new book that's in stores now and available on Amazon and all of the usual places. But where do the ideas come from?
Ideas come from all over. Reading articles in newspapers, talking to people at cocktail parties. I spent a month hanging out with Detroit Police Homicide and got a few ideas.
Oh, I bet you did.
During that time, talking to detectives, reading case files, going to crime scenes. There was tons of stuff.
Yeah. Well, Raylan Goes to Detroit. Let's talk about that now. So, in summary so far, we've talked about you and I. We've talked about Elmore, your father. Passed away how long? 4 years ago now?
Yeah, 2013,
Yeah.
5 years ago.
He was very successful with a series that he wrote called Justified.
Right, he didn't write it, though. It was taken from a short story, Fire in the Hole, that he did write.
Uh-huh.
And then the 6 seasons of Justified were written by a team of writers, headed by a guy named Graham Yost,
Okay.
the showrunner.
So, your dad, from a short story, here comes Justified, Raylan Gibbons. Was that your dad's name, though? Did he give Raylan that name in Fire in the Hole?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he had actually...
So he knew in his head, he knew who Raylan Gibbons was and what he was going to look like. Therefore, the show is a hit. 6 seasons. It's on FX.
Indeed.
Starring Timothy Oliphant, known more for the look and the hat, right?
Absolutely.
Tell me the story about the hat.
Elmore was always concerned about hats because I think he, as a guy who wrote westerns for many years, he had to make sure that the people that wore hats wore them right, and they wore them low over their eyes in his mind. And so when Tim Oliphant signed on for Justified, Elmore first of all was hoping that they would get the right hat, a Stetson, and then he was concerned about Tim wearing it properly, and everything worked out. He was very happy.
I thought at first he didn't. I had heard the story that he didn't like Tim's first hat.
He didn't. No.
Yeah. Is that true?
Yes, that's a fact.
He said that ain't the hat, right?
Right.
And then he looked back and he said, "Now that's a hat."
The name Raylan came from a booksellers convention in I think it was in Texas.
Yeah.
A guy walked up to my father and he said, "Hi, I'm Raylan Givens. I love your work." Well, Elmore loved his name and said to himself, "Raylan Givens, that's a book." So Elmore put Raylan in a book called Pronto in 1993 and Writing the Rap in 95. And then he wrote Fire in the Hole.
I love getting the backstories on these things. You and your father do the same thing. You fall in love with names. You're really a key component for you in the stories, right?
Well, if the name isn't right, you can't make the character talk.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
I like that. I like the way you just said that. It's a good lesson for writers out there right now that are listening. So let's get into Raylan Goes to Detroit a little bit. Following Justified, Raylan is a U.S. Marshal. Raylan is in Kentucky. Raylan gets in trouble in Kentucky, and as a little bit of his punishment, he's sent to Detroit.
Well, in my story,
Yeah.
He has an altercation with his boss, and what he does is he cuffs his boss to the steering wheel of the boss's car and takes his weapon, and Raylan is disciplined and pretty much kicked out of the marshal service until his former boss, Art Mullen, comes to his aid and gets him reinstated. But there's only one opening, and that's in Detroit. And nobody wanted to go to Detroit.
Compelling. Good way to get it there. How does Raylan end up liking Detroit? And Raylan Goes to Detroit. I know. We're just going to have to read and find out.
Indeed, yeah.
But you told me to do the research on this. You got to ride and actually play the part of a U.S. Marshal for a couple of weeks.
I did. After getting approval from the U.S. Marshal Service in Washington, I was assigned to the Fugitive Task Force in Detroit. And I showed up for work one Monday, and I was given a bulletproof vest, tack vest, and this is the only time in my life that I wore a vest to work. And it was fun, I must say. So,
What is it, about a 55-pound vest, too?
Yeah, I actually wore the soft vest, but...
So you rode around, you went to some hot spots, I guess, down the road, eh?
Indeed. Yeah. I rode with a young female, the only woman on the Fugitive Task Force that was really made up of alpha males, guys who were in law enforcement or Marines, and they were all tough guys. And this girl, Sully, held her own. And so I rode with her the first day, and it was pretty interesting. We got in one high-speed driving situation, and she was going 100 miles an hour on Grand River in Detroit, weaving through traffic because we had to get to a house where a fugitive had just showed up. And so as we arrived, Sully looked over at me and she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Fine, yeah, no problem." We've had friends over the years who like to drive fast, right? Tony Cloutier, for one.
Yeah, Bill Wink's another.
Bill Wink, indeed, yeah.
We've got some friends that have had some real Motor City muscle under their shorts. We've gone fast a number of times. So you found your couple of weeks with the U.S. Marshals fairly interesting, right? Give me the names of some of these people.
They all had nicknames. Sully, Ponch, Cornbread, big country, street, Google.
What is it about cops that they have to have a nickname?
Well, I think it's more to protect their identity than to be funny.
Hey, now when you're rolling around in one of those rides, are they marked up at all, or do you put that little bubble up on the dashboard?
They put the bubble on the dashboard,
yeah.
But the cars are all beat up. They're old models. There are sedans, and Sully drove a minivan, and somebody else drove Cornbread drove a pickup truck, and so all these mismatched old cars would pull into a neighborhood, and they looked like they belonged there.
Yeah.
So that was the idea. The marshals didn't want to call attention to themselves.
Do you see Raylan Goes to Detroit? Is this something that could make the big screen? Is that something that you ponder, or is it ever something that you hope would happen, or rather you would just have a hell of a good book and some great sales?
Well, I wrote it for the screen. I mean, it's written in scenes, and there's a lot of action, so I definitely see it as a movie. I wanted to go back to one thing. Sully, the girl, the lone female, and I were riding around, and she pulled into a gas station market, and there were half a dozen young dudes, their pants down on their bony hips, showing 6 inches of underwear.
Right.
And so Sally got out of the car, and she said, "Don't get carjacked." And I said, "Where's my gun?" And she said, "It's in the compartment between the seats. Do you know how to shoot?" And I said, "Hey, I've had a BB gun till I was 40. So she gets out and goes into the store and comes out of the store a few minutes later, and she's talking to one of the guys. And so she gets in the car, and I said, "What were you talking about?" She said, the kid said that he thought he just saw me in a video game, that, dressed as I am with a tack vest and a Glock. And then he asked me out to dinner. He said he wanted to take me to a steakhouse. And so I said, "Well, what did you say?" And she said, "I'm a vegetarian."
You can't make this up, folks. Peter Leonard is my guest. WKEN, the Cozy Studios. Every day it's the weekend. I'm having a ball right now. Raylan Goes to Detroit. This is number 8. 9 and 10 are in the works. Never stops writing. However, I think the juicy part of the story and what people really are dying to know is, Ken, how can you have a friendship, a relationship with Peter Leonard, gifted author? Well, how do you get in a book, Ken? Have you ever had a chance to get Peter Leonard to put your name in a book? I guess we'd have to be honest with people and say, by golly, I have been in a book or two.
Well, you were in 2 of Elmore's books.
I was in Touch and Be Cool.
Yeah. Playing.
I was playing the part of Ken Calvert, a DJ of all things.
Right.
I remember as your dad, I think we went to a BOC concert at Cobo Arena, and we went backstage so we could have an opportunity to see. His group was called the Cobras.
Right.
And he wanted
with Blue Oyster Cult. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so we had some serious laughs, and so I made the cut on that one.
Well, I had an experience with Blue Oyster Cult in L.A. I was backstage with Gary Gratzer, whose brother was in REO Speedwagon.
He was a drummer, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a band member from the Blue Oyster Cult was walking around in his underwear in this room full of people. Right. There was a buffet table, and he walked over and took a fork and speared it through the ham. There were all these ham slices, a couple inches thick.
Right.
He picked it up and he took a bite and threw the fork. But boy, that's something.
That's rock and roll.
That's being a rock star.
That's right. Yeah. So in the book Quiver, that was your first book?
Yes.
Quiver.
Yeah.
There's a character, and his name is Ken Calvert. Tell me a little bit about Ken Calvert in this.
Ken Calvert is a bank manager at Traverse City Bank and Trust. Mm-hmm. And Ken grinned, showing his chiclet-sized teeth that were so white they looked blue. And then Ken had a clipboard in his pale hands that each had 2 gold rings, the rings seeming more excessive when she noticed the gold watch and the gold ID bracelet on his wrists. That's Ken Calvert, bank manager.
Wow. But I made it. I made the cut. Have you ever had a situation, Pete, where you put somebody in that we know and they have not been happy to be in the book?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple times.
All right. And but sometimes you don't share that information until the book comes out, and they all of a sudden appear in the book.
I was at a party, and an old friend came up to me, and he said, "Hey, I'd like to be in one of your books." And I said, "Really? You sure?" He said, "Yeah. Come on, just put me in." I said, "Well, you're going to be a bad guy." He said, "Great, all the better." So the book comes out, and my friend read it, and I saw him in a bar a couple weeks later, and he said, I lived in a trailer park. He said, I was a stick-up man. I said, you made me look awful. I said, well, I told you, that's the way it was going to be. So you got to be very careful.
A couple of final things with you. I know you're busy. Raylan Goes to Detroit. Not many bookstores, but there are a few still out there. People can still go to a little brick and mortar place and actually pick up a copy of Raylan Goes to Detroit. Of course, the book is available on Amazon.com and all the usual.
And BarnesandNoble.com.
Yeah, you can find it. Believe me, if you can't find it online, we can't help you. But hate to ask you this sort of question, but is it your finest book yet?
Probably. I think that latest book is my finest book.
I remember asking your dad this, and I got to ask you this now as well. When do you know it's time to wrap it up? Let's get this thing done and put an ending on it, put a bow on this box.
That's a good question. Elmore told me that he thought that he could write a book forever, one book, because you keep refining and refining. But I think you get to a point where you just think, okay, it's finished. I got to hand it off. I can't work on it any longer.
How many times have you changed the ending?
On the book that I just finished, Sweet Dreams, I've changed the ending about 15 times.
Why?
It just, I don't know, it sounded good, and then the next day it didn't sound good.
Uh-huh.
And so I made some changes, and then, you review and refine. That's how it is.
But then all of a sudden, isn't writing the very last sentence the toughest thing to do?
I don't think so. But as my father said to me many times, writing is rewriting. And boy, is that true.
I do have a question for you. If I'm a writer and I finish my project, I finish my novel, finish my book, and I send it off to my publisher, hold on, there's another step. We have an editor to deal with. That would drive me crazy. That's somebody kind of readjusting the seats in my car. How do you feel about editors?
Well, I think some are better than others. The editor, Guy Antosi, who worked on Raylan Goes to Detroit with me, was excellent, really good. He was probably the best editor I've ever had. He chimed in a few times on some things, but he said to me, this is your book. I want it to sound like you, not me. And he got it, and it was great. I've had other editors that stuck their nose in too much, and they wanted to edit. Editors want to edit.
Who decides on the editor?
Well, the publishing house decides on the editor.
Why do they have so much power? I know because they're publishing the book, but...
Well, they don't. I mean, I can give them whatever I want.
I see.
But, I want to be collegial. I want to be, helpful, and I want to make the book the best I can, and getting some feedback can help with that.
Are books more popular, less popular, or the same? People that love to read, and they want more, they want more, they want more. A lot of people like books on audio tape now. A lot of people like short stories, whatever. Do you have anything to suggest that more or less people are picking up and reading a book these days?
Well, I think there are so many ways to be entertained that book sales are shrinking, and it's just the way it is.
Guy wrote a song called "That's Just the Way It Is," and there was a guy named Walter Cronkite who used to end his show.
He did, didn't he?
Something close to that, yeah.
Right.
So, well, I hope you have nothing but great success with Raylan Goes to Detroit. In bookstores now, available online, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all the usual places. And love to see it up on the big screen.
Excellent.
And I think I could play Raylan Givens pretty damn good.
You know how to wear a hat.
I know that. I know how to wear a hat, and I think I got a really good voice for the part.
You wear it low over your eyes.
Calvert walked into the bar, had sort of a salty look on his face. All of a sudden, he looked over and saw a dude that was glaring at him. I said to him, "What are you looking at?"
Well, you got the beginning of a book there. Write it down.
All right, I'll do that right now. Peter Leonard has been my guest, and I want to thank you for joining us, Peter, and thank you for joining us on the Ken Calvert Podcast, The Ken Calvert Show. We'll see you next time, everybody.
You can subscribe to the Ken Calvert Show podcast on Apple iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. It's also available by going directly to www.thekencalvertshow.com. You can reach Ken at kencalvertpodcast@gmail.com. The preceding program is the property of Ken Calvert and may not be rebroadcast without the written permission of Ken Calvert.